only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
The National Weather Service has issued a severe thunderstorm warning.
Welcome to the Common Sense Practical Prepper Podcast, where prepping doesn't have to be complicated or expensive. Coming to you from a well-defended off-grid compound high in the mountains. Coming to you from his Florida room in Richmond, Virginia. Neither off-grid nor well-defended, unless you count as chickens and cats. Here is your host, Keith.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Common Sense Practical Prepper Podcast. My name is Keith, and this is episode 17. Episode 17. It is Sunday, October the 9th, 2022. So fall has finally arrived here in Central Virginia. Fall is my favorite season, followed closely by spring, I would guess. I like fall because I get to turn the air conditioner off, I get to crack a few windows, I get to get under my duvet and some covers, and I sleep. I sleep so much better when it's cool in the room. And it also reminds me of going back to college, football Saturdays, that sort of thing. Going into the closet, looking for the hoodies, the warmer clothes, sweaters, hats, that sort of thing. So I kind of like fall. All right. Let's talk about the price of gas. So OPEC and those crazy, wacky knuckleheads, well, mostly in Saudi Arabia, have decided to reduce production by 2 million barrels a day. Now, 2 million of anything is a lot, but with the when you look at the total output from OPEC and some of the other countries that are not a part of OPEC, and they're much smaller players, 2 million barrels isn't a significant reduction, but it's still enough to get everybody, get everybody's panties in a wad. And because of that, last week when we talked, when gas was, $3 a gallon, give or take, in the last 4 or 5 days, it's jumped to $3.50 a gallon. So now everybody's freaking out, and of course, the price immediately shoots up. And here's the funny thing about it. The gas that we're using in our cars today, the oil that's being refined today and tomorrow, so a 2 million barrel a day decrease in production is a lot, but it shouldn't be to the point where gas goes up from $3 a gallon to $3.50 a gallon. So they're going to slow down production, let's say, tomorrow. Well, the price of gas is immediately going to jump today. The gas that we're burning in our cars comes from oil that was brought into the United States several weeks ago. So, the oil companies and the gas companies, they don't waste any time jacking up the price, even though it's going to take several weeks, for that reduction really to start hitting, I guess, the supply chain. But gas is $3.50 a gallon here in Central Virginia. Like I said, it was on October 2nd, the nationwide average, the average here in this area was $3.18. Now it's $3.50. So a pretty big jump just in a week. Let's talk about the increase of propane. Propane in March of 2022 was $2.60 a gallon. Now it's $3 a gallon. It's up 17% year over year. With winter quickly closing in on us, heating oil. A lot of homes in the Northeast are older homes. They don't have heat pumps. Heating oil in January of 2020, on the average, was $1.11 a gallon. It's now $4.62. Some areas up in New Hampshire and New England, Massachusetts, $5 a gallon. That's a 500% increase. That's going to be a significant financial hardship on a lot of folks. Elderly folks that are on a fixed income, Social Security, and people not being able to budget the heating oil, 4 times as expensive as it was, just a couple years ago. add in, they're saying we're supposed to have a significantly cold winter, much colder than we've had in the last few years. That's a potential for some a pretty significant hardship for these folks. Now, they also said this hurricane season was going to be one of the worst hurricane seasons ever for the number of hurricanes. And of course, that didn't really come to fruition, but we'll talk about Ian here in a second. So inflation 8.2%, depending on who you talk to, what website you go to, a year-over-year increase of 57%. So, inflation as a whole, 8.2%, but tell somebody up in Boston that inflation is only 8.2%, but they're paying 4 or 5 times the amount for their heating oil as they did, 2.5 years ago. All right, switching gears to the hunt for Red October, the Doomsday Sub, or whatever they call it, was seen a few days ago on the surface in the Barents Sea. What kind of strikes me odd about that is if Putin wanted to scare the bejesus out of everybody, he wouldn't put the sub on the surface. This is a nuclear-powered sub. This thing can go underwater and stay underwater for several months at a time. So it's just kind of weird. Why would you put it up on the surface where it's going to be seen either by surface ships or by satellite? And, so now that we know where it is or where it was several days ago, it not really calmed the fears of a lot of people thinking he's going to, roll up to the East Coast and launch one of those big nuclear torpedoes or whatever the hell he's going to do with it. I just don't think that he would have put it on the surface if he really wanted to be stealthy. If he wanted to be stealthy and have people guessing, he would have left it, below the surface. But, they spotted it a few days ago running around in the Barents Sea. So who really knows what's going to come out of that? But if you go on YouTube and a bunch of websites, man, some of these content providers are absolutely making hay out of this. A lot of people on some of these prepping forums that I read every now and again, everybody's talking about how to survive a nuclear explosion, nuclear fallout. I'm sorry, I haven't prepped for that. I don't know anything about that. I'm in Richmond, Virginia, so I'm 80 miles from the Norfolk Naval Base, and I'm 110 miles from Washington, D.C. So I'm pretty sure between Norfolk and Washington, D.C., if a sizable nuclear missile hits either of those, I am not going to have to worry about, how many pounds of beans and rice and freeze-dried hamburger I have in my prepping pantry. Really not going to have to worry about that. So let's talk about that bridge, the Kerch Bridge. So it's a railway bridge and a vehicle bridge, cars, trucks. Then over to the side, there's railroad tracks. It's a fairly new bridge. It's like 11 or 12 miles, like the longest bridge in that part of the world and stuff. Very, a very engineering marvel, I guess you could say, for Russia. And it goes from Crimea over to the mainland of Russia. Well, we all know about Crimea. That was in 2014 when Russia invaded Crimea and, air quote, annexed Crimea. Apparently had a vote just like they had in those territories here in Ukraine, and 99% of the people said, yes, we in Crimea want to be part of Russia. And I really think it just gave Putin an excuse to invade the country and then have a port there that he could. What's the Black Sea Fleet? I think they call it. So he's down in Crimea now. He has a port for his navy for the Black Sea Fleet. So Russia is saying it was a truck bomb, and if you've seen the video on the internet, my goodness, the fireball from that explosion was absolutely enormous. And I haven't seen a lot of detailed photos, so I'm not sure. So they're saying it's a truck bomb, but some of the railway cars were burning. They were the cylindrical railway cars, which lead me to believe they had some sort of they had liquid, more than likely a flammable liquid, probably oil, fuel oil, that sort of thing. So it's pretty much a dent, plus an embarrassment to Putin. Well, what else does this guy need? The Ukrainian Navy sunk like their flagship, their battleship, their destroyer as it was sitting in port. The Ukrainian military is just being able to pick off a lot of ships. It wouldn't surprise me if that was a missile or something that struck that train or struck part of that bridge, and caused this huge explosion. But in the in normal Russian propaganda fashion, they came out within several hours and said there was minimal damage. But you disregard the 2 lanes where vehicles travel that's currently sitting in the water. So I would hate to see what severe damage is if they're calling this minimal damage. So I don't think anybody has really taken credit for the attack on this bridge. I figured, the Ukrainian army would be like, yes, that was us, and screw you, Putin. We're going to launch missiles at your ships, and we're going to blow up your bridges and all that weird stuff. But nobody's taking credit for that. So we'll see in the upcoming days what exactly happens. All right, switching gears a little bit to the aftermath of Hurricane Ian. So 99% of Florida has power restored. I believe at one time there was a little over 2 million homes that did not have power. Now, you chalk that up to very good planning. I think Governor DeSantis said 50,000 linemen, much more than I initially spoke about a week or so ago. 50,000 linemen were already staged and ready to go. And when the calls came in, they just went out and took care of those things. Now, simple lines and transformers, that's a fairly easy fix. Then you've got the substations, and the high power lines, the high tension power lines. Those are a little more complicated to take care of. It takes a little bit longer. But 99% of the residents who had their power knocked out actually have power back. Now, obviously, that does not count like Fort Myers, Sanibel Island. That basically there's no houses there to bring power to. So those areas absolutely devastated. That's going to take several weeks, several months for that area to get back on its feet. So speaking of Hurricane Ian, I know several podcasts ago I talked about ready.gov. I'm not a big fan of government, but ready.gov here in the U.S. is actually a very good website. It gives a lot of detail, and I was looking at their hurricane preparedness documents and what they listed. So, and it's some of the same things that I've talked about before. So going to the website, it says build your emergency supply kit over time. Start with items you may already have in your home, like a flashlight, extra batteries, copies of important documents, water, non-perishable food. When you go to the grocery store, pick up an extra item that you use regularly, especially if it's on sale. I wonder who mentioned that several podcasts ago, that when you go to your grocery store du jour, or you go to Costco, you get a case of water, just grab one more. You get a flashlight, you get some batteries, grab another set of batteries. So just like the government said, it does not have to be expensive, and it's something you can do over time. You would be amazed that every couple trips to the grocery store, you pick up something extra, and there you go. All right, water, 1 gallon per person per day for drinking and sanitation. Now, I always go with 2 gallons, 2 gallons of water per person per day. Food, at least several days supply of non-perishable food. All right, no bologna, no cheese. It's your soups and stuff like that. A battery-powered or hand-cranked radio with NOAA weather radio with a tone alert. So the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, they give out all the alerts for severe weather and that sort of thing. And we're specifically talking about a hurricane. But this type of little setup emergency supply kit can apply to anything. So you got your flashlight, small first aid kit, extra batteries, of course, a whistle to signal for help. I didn't think of that initially. A dust. So the dust mask that you wear at dusk, apparently. A dust mask. Lord, I can't use my mouth words. Dust mask. The thing you put over your face that we wore for the last 2.5 years because of COVID, I'm sure you have a few of those laying around. Throw those in your little kit. Plastic sheeting and duct tape if you're going to shelter in place. Now, this is something that can be used in the event of, some sort of nuclear fallout. You seal your windows, that sort of thing, to keep the bad air out and keep the good air in. And also it helps with, water, moisture, humidity, that sort of thing. Moist towelettes. All right, how are you going to wash your butt and after you go to the bathroom and stuff like that? Moist towelettes, garbage bags, and plastic ties for all your dirty, poopy stuff. Something people don't think about. Where am I going to put my dirty, poopy stuff? Well, we're going to put it in a garbage bag or a Ziploc bag, like those gallon Ziploc bags are pretty good size. Well, hence the name gallon. And you can put your poopy stuff in there and just go ahead and zip it closed. And then you would put that, set that aside in a garbage can or garbage bag and put that outside or far away from everybody else. And that's your little, poopy place corner bag over there in the corner. A wrench or pliers, like a small tool set, you can get those relatively inexpensive. A few screwdrivers, a wrench, a couple sockets, pliers, something real simple. Those are used to turn off utilities. Now, here's a quick sidebar. You need to know how to turn off the water at the street. Not in your house, turning the spigot left and right. I get that. You can turn it off like under the house. I get that. But you need to be able to turn it off at basically at the sidewalk outside the house. So they have these special, I think it's called like a T-wrench. So if you're able to go outside and look for the little metal cover, I have one in my front yard and it has a meter. So the water people come around and they look down, they read the meter. I also have one of those T-wrenches in my garage. So in the event I need to turn it off inside, let's say there's a massive leak, a big pipe bust, and there's no shutoff valve between the street and this burst pipe that's going to the kitchen or whatever. I would have to grab my T-wrench, pop the cap, and then turn it off at the street to keep the flooding down. A manual can opener. The ones with the little handle thing. Have one of those because if you're without power, the electric can opener is not going to work. Local maps. That's something that I didn't even realize. You can go to Amazon. You can go to the USGS, United States Geological Service, and you can get regular maps, topographical maps, or topographical maps, depending on how you want to pronounce it, and get those because let's say a dead cell phone. You don't have MapQuest on your phone. And your GPS isn't working, so you would need to refer to a paper map. 90% of the people out there probably cannot navigate or read a paper map. We've got so used to technology and our phones and the software we have, getting us different places. A cell phone with the charging cables, as well as the battery backup. The charging bricks or whatever you want to call it. 22,000 milliamp or whatever, definitely want to look into those. I have probably 2 or 3 of different sizes. I have one that's actually solar, not very efficient, but the sun's shining. I go ahead and set it outside and it charges in a couple hours and I get probably 2-3 charges, from a dead cell phone all the way up to full. So certainly something to look into, and they're really not that expensive. I think it was like $12 or $14. So dig this. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Administration Agency, something, alphabet, acronym, they have a brand new app. So if you're here in the States, go to the Google Play Store or the App Store if you have an Apple, and look up the FEMA app. It's relatively new. It has a lot of information. I was pleasantly surprised. It's laid out. The list that I just went through is actually on there, and there's a lot of additional information. There's one thing they talked about. It's about having a financial plan, financial preparedness. Haven't even thought about this. I've heard people talk about like your photo ID, your birth certificate, social security card, like military service, your discharge papers, your, a DD-214, the paperwork for your pets if they've had their rabies shots, and the licensing, I guess, if your local jurisdiction requires licensing. So try to have those digitized and either have them on like a small thumb drive. You can even laminate them and have them with you. So you don't want those to get destroyed. The thing about ID is this: in the event that you're ever separated from, let's say, your kids, and for whatever happens, you're separated, and then you go to some shelter, and you're going to say, those are my kids. You're going to have to be able to identify them. So they'll have a copy of their ID, and then you can also have a copy saying, no, my kids' name are Linda and Joey, and, have they checked into this shelter? Otherwise, you just, with people with no identification, just this man and woman come walking off with this little kid in tow, and the officials are like, who do you have here? Well, this is our kid, Jimmy. Well, how do I know this is your child? Well, we don't know, something else crazy going on, but it's just a way to make sure that you're preserving a lot of your financial documents to prove you are who you are. Like a tax bill, tax return, anything that you have that identifies you, where you live, where you're from, definitely keep those with you in the event you do have to leave the residence because of flooding or whatever, or if the home's destroyed. If that is uploaded, it's onto a thumb drive, a small external hard drive, or even in the cloud. Take a photo of your Social Security card. As long as it's secure, you keep your phone secure, you put it up in the cloud, and you can always download that. You lose your phone, but you'd update it to the cloud. So if you have an iPhone, you get the new phone or whatever, you can then download that. Or you're on a laptop, you can sign into the cloud and then bring those documents down to prove you are who you are. Something I didn't even really think about, but it's a thing. Okay. This week in preps. Over the weekend, I freeze-dried 8 dozen raw eggs and basically made them into a powder. When they come off the trays, each vacuum bag holds about 2 dozen and some change, and I have 4 bags, and I tried to make them pretty uniform so I know what they hold. And now that can be used in any baking recipes that call for eggs, or you can just reconstitute those into warm water, and then you have scrambled eggs. Now, they don't taste the same as fresh scrambled eggs, but they'll do the trick. A little salt and pepper, maybe some Tabasco, a little bit of hot sauce, and you're good to go. So those took about 28 hours in the freeze dryer. I filled the 4 trays, almost to the very top, and it's more eggs than I have put in there before. I knew it was going to take a little bit longer, but I had no idea it was going to take 28 hours. I was going to do 2 different batches, but it just ran too long. There was no way I could start this other batch in time before I had to go to work tomorrow. So that's really all the prepping I really had a chance to take care of. I want to talk real quick. I was going to talk about an EDC, which is what's called an everyday carry bag, not to be confused with a get home bag or a go bag or a bug out bag. There's some subtle differences. Now there is a lot of crossover between the two, but here's the definition of an everyday carry bag. Just like in the name, it's an EDC, everyday carry. So when you go to work, what do you carry with you? Let's say you just have a laptop, your phone charger. So in an everyday carry bag, you always have that bag with you, or it's just a few feet away in case you need to leave or evacuate wherever you happen to be. All right, so it's a smaller bag. It's not a huge backpack. They have like over-the-shoulder type bags. They have a lot of the EDCs. You can get the camouflage and, all that kind of stuff. And that really kind of gives it away. There's more subtle type bags you can have. And it's just a small over-the-shoulder bag or a very small backpack. People carry those, around all the time. All right. A lighter, and I say a ferro rod. So a ferro rod is you have a striker and then you have the ferro rod, and basically it makes sparks. It can get wet, you dry it off, and it's basically a very simple way to make a fire. Not as simple as a lighter, but there you go. A lighter can break, it can get wet, that sort of thing, but a ferro rod will not. A change of clothes, obviously depending on the weather. So in an EDC bag here in Central Virginia right now, you'd have another pair of pants, underwear, socks, that sort of thing. Something you could change into in the event it's raining, it got really, really cold between the environment you're in, the office environment, and then you have to vacate that. Hiking shoes. Now, I wear hiking boots pretty much 24/7, so I don't need to worry about that. And, you're going to be carrying this bag, so you don't want it to get too heavy. A bandana, in case there's smoke or something in the air, you want to filter out as much as you can. A knife, a good folding knife. A multi-tool, you think like a Leatherman, the little foldy thing, it's got the scissors and the different screwdrivers, that sort of thing. A very small first aid kit. A lot of people will take Mentos, the box of Mentos, or they still have Sucrets, the little metal mint canister or whatever. You can actually make your own very simple first aid kit and actually put it inside one of those little metal tins. Paracord, or what they call 550 cord, 5 or 10 feet of that, and you can wrap it around the first aid kit. You can wrap it around the multi-tool if you have to, lash something. So you also need to bring along, like, I call them you can call them bivvies, or like a small, it's not really a tarp. It's a very, very lightweight. Just kind of think of like a rain fly that goes over your tent when you go camping. It's just something if you have to get under, if the weather's really bad, it's just something, it'll work. And especially with the paracord, you can tie it off to, a tree, that sort of thing. And then a lot of people have like paracord boot laces. They actually make those. So, you have a set of those actually in your boot in the case of an emergency. A metal water bottle, like the thermoflask, or I think thermoflask. You don't have to get the super duper fancy one, the double insulated, vacuum sealed. Just the metal one, relatively small. It doesn't have to be like, a 6-gallon water bottle. As far as like foods, some snacky stuff, protein bar, granola bar, that sort of thing. A headlight. We don't want to take those off the car. A headlamp or a flashlight. It's the combination. So a small flashlight, it could take AA's, just a small handheld flashlight. Obviously your keys, wallet, cell phones, and some emergency cash. I know with me, it's difficult sometimes. I always have you always have our debit cards on us. We don't have a lot of cash. At least I don't. So in that EDC, just have a little pocket with like a 20, a 10, a 5, and maybe like 5 or 10 ones. And just keep that tucked away in one of the corners, because you never know. Like you're going to pay for an Uber, you're going to pay for a ride somewhere, you're going to pay for a bus, you get on the train. All the systems are down, but they're still requiring payment. Look, here's $5, here's $8. You go by a store as you're walking home or leaving the area, getting to where you need to go. No ATMs, no power, but still, there's people selling things. You need to grab some water or some soda or some snacks, and, they can't take debit card because there's no power. So that's basically what an EDC is. Now, if you work in an office, you're going to have your laptop with you, the chargers, and that sort of thing. So it's everything that you would normally carry on you going to work, plus those, 8 or 10 or 12 items that I mentioned. So again, you don't have to go out and buy them all at once. You can go ahead and just kind of piecemeal it. Oh, I'm going to Costco and I bought this. Oh, look, here's a set of 3 flashlights on sale for $10 or $12. I'm going to put one in the garage. I'm going to put one under the sink, and one of the little flashlights, AA batteries, is going to go in my EDC. And just go ahead and drop that stuff in the pocket. And so it's just something to have in case you're away from home and you have to get, to your car, to your mode of transportation, or let's say you're not able to get, to the bus, to the train, to your car, and you're going to have to take a different route. So you have a couple things that's going to get you through at least the day, maybe through the night until, you formulate a plan. Somebody's going to be able to come get you, depending on the situation. And again, really customize the EDC to your needs. Maybe you have a different type of clothing that you want to put in there, like an emergency blanket. Those like Mylar blankets that like the firefighters that fight the forest fires and stuff. Those emergency blankets, they do very, very well reflecting heat back onto you. So if you're injured, you need to stay warm. If you're in shock, you need to stay warm. If you're wet, you definitely need to stay warm. So you have that, and in a pinch, it could kind of double as an emergency shelter. And those things are super, super, super lightweight. Hand warmers. So here it is getting cold. Probably throw in a couple of hand warmers. The chemical ones you just smush in your hands and you roll them around. And those can be good for your hands. Those can be put like an interior pocket of your jacket, the pocket of your pants. Don't put them on your bare skin. Put a layer of something between the two, and then it's going to be able to keep you warm. So anyway, it's entirely up to you. You personalize it, but that's something that I'm going to start to put together like in the next month. So I'm going to get the bag, and I'm going to start looking at what I would need. Now, if you have for personal protection, if you don't want a knife, well, keep the knife. What about a firearm? Some people carry firearms with them. Some people they don't want anything to do with firearms. You do you. But in your EDC bag, a small firearm probably wouldn't be a bad thing to have, with the understanding that you need to make sure that you're abiding by, local, state, and federal law in some places. In your workplace. If your workplace does not allow firearms, don't take a firearm into work. And, you go through, security, and then they locate your firearm in your EDC bag with your laptop, and then, you're out of a job and you have more things to worry about. But anyway, folks, ran a little bit long. I said 30 minutes. I right at about 30 minutes now. But a lot of things I wanted to get into. OPEC cutting back oil production. The price of fuels, all sorts of fuels are going to the roof. The sub, Putin and his shenanigans. And then don't forget, go to the FEMA website and check out the app. I was really impressed. It's something I'm going to take a little bit deeper look at in the next few days. A lot of good information on there. And then your EDC bag. So I'll let you know how mine's coming along. Everybody, as usual, be safe. Take care of one another, and until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Common Sense Practical Prepper Podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. While you're at it, help spread the word by leaving a rating and review.